the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. See my wee fan, it's kind of hot here. I've got a wee fan going, trying to keep you cool. Starting the show on a sad note, a very good friend of the show and a very good stalwart of the independence movement, Tris McPherson, sadly left us today. Another one who's gone the way without seeing independence. Another one that was, like the rest of us, hoping it was going to happen in the last 10 years and it didn't. A much loved person, a really lovely individual. For any of you who met her, your life would have been enhanced. She was a lovely person, really a lovely person. And she was recently, actually, one of our last trips with her daughters to Barcelona, and unfortunately, I wasn't here at the time and would have tried to catch up, but c'est la vie. But anyway, her funeral will be in, let me get this, it's the Al Amanithe Hall Grange in Peterhead on Thursday, the 8th of August at 10:30 for anyone who wishes to go there and pay the respects. And our condolences to everyone, to our brother Andy McCall, who's now a great stalwart of this show and a stalwart of the movement. All the best. Rest in peace, Trish. And another bit of news. Unfortunately, Mr. Quinton can't join us today. His mum's not well, and he's taking care of his mum, who's sadly in hospital. And we wish her well and hope she's recovers quickly, and we'll get Lloyd back as soon as possible. But not to worry. We also have to thank Alan Petrie for stepping in literally at the last minute when we got word from Lloyd. So Alan Petrie from up there in Dundee, our man. Alan, thank you for stepping in.
No problem, Roddy. Glad to be here and see you all.
Good. You'll be getting blind, but hey, it makes it all the more exciting. And there, of course, we've got our favourite lawyer up there in Clackmannanshire, our Eva. Now, I'm not going to ask how you are, Eva, because maybe our watchers and viewers don't know, because you're no great. You want to tell everyone what's happened to you?
I've had a smashing week in more ways than one, shall I say. And I'm now sporting a lovely pink spooky on my stump, on my amputated leg, having broken my femur. So many thanks to the Scottish Ambulance Service and to the staff, the nurses and the medics at Forth Valley Hospital in Larbert. I'm grounded for a couple of months, which may be no bad thing for certain people, given certain developments this week.
Yeah, well, actually, the other thing is, our Eva and Matt, the two Matts, were coming to visit me for a wee holiday next week. Sadly, ain't going to happen now. Mind you, it means my booze is safe for another couple of weeks. Although, trust me, and I tell you something, you'll know it's been taking a hammer. And last but not least, the Coatbridge Cavalier. Mr. Boswell, how are you?
Splendid. How's everybody doing?
Where are you anyway these days? I mean, you travel everywhere, Brussels, Washington, Germany. Where are you?
Very, very fortunate. I'm in sunny Spain, which is great. So, me and the kit, we did a wee bit of scoogling about. So we were, she came over to Brussels first. Then I had a business meeting, I had to go to Kaiserslautern. So we went to Heidelberg, and then a day in Bruges, and then down to my family down in San Pedro de Alcantara. It was a riot, 5 days of partying there. And then I find myself in a basement somewhere just south of Barcelona. And there's even more drink and magnificent lemons. But no, I need to. So I'm in your basement, Roddy, as well, you know. Happy days. So we're having a riot. We're having I know, bring out the gimp.
I've got to tell you, folks, just about 20 minutes ago, I had to get him out of his bed. He was still in his scratcher, out the game. I had to wake him up, get him ready for the show. Otherwise, it would have just been me, Alan, and Eva. But anyway,
but what I did, in fairness, I did check back. I think the last time I was on, I was flying. I was in the air the last time the show was on. So unfortunately couldn't join. But the show before, I looked back, I checked back myself. I went, you took that too far, Boswell. You took that too far. So I thought I better wind it in a wee bit. So out of respect for my colleagues and those of that take this passion we have for independence so seriously. So I'll wind in the drinking a wee bit on the show, but I'm still going down like a burning spitfire. No chance am I going quietly. No chance.
Let me tell you, folks, he's not kidding. He's been here for a few days. My liver is screaming, absolutely screaming, and we've got plans. We're meant to be having a quiet barbecue after the show.
Delightful old chap.
Carnage. Anyway, let's move on because there's an awful lot. It's been a heck of a week. Fortunately, well, as we're doing this on Sunday morning, folks, just shortly before it goes out. To the best of my knowledge, World War III hasn't quite started yet, but anything could happen in the next half hour. They used to say in that famous television show when I was a child, what was it, Stingray? Anything could happen in the next half hour. Anyway, let's start low in Scotty Botland. We'll go into what's happening globally later. Alan, you'll have been aware of it. The Labour Party, who throughout the campaign for the election told us there'd be no austerity, no cuts, nothing. It would be the land of milk and honey. They've just come in, stick it up, techie. Labour, savage cuts, billions of pounds of cuts. Austerity continues. Didn't Mr. Anas Sarwar, Alan, say, watch my lips, there will be no austerity? And he had his fingers crossed behind his back, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, he certainly did. I mean, I don't think his fingers were behind his back crossed. I think they were just holding Starmer's hand that was going up his backside. Because Sarwar is he's just a puppet of the British state. And it's just proven yet again that there is no independent Scottish Labour Party. No. They will do as they're told. Every single one of their MPs will just follow Starmer right through the lobby to vote for what he wants, regardless of what they promise the people. But it should come as no surprise. I mean, Labour, the last time they were in government, promised to make a bonfire of the Quangos, then increased them. Now, if they want to make any cuts, get rid of every single Quango. Get rid of all these thousands of pounds that are paying for these managers that are sitting on their backside, making the public's life misery. If there is places that can be cut, it should never, ever be to the poor. And that is where Labour have targeted, because they're the easy option, because they don't vote or they're not registered to vote. We all told you this was going to happen. Some people, even within the independence movement, voted Labour to get rid of the Tories. And all they've done is got Tory policies through the back door. They should have been voting pro-independence or spoiling their ballot paper with Not My Parliament to make a point. They should never, ever be helping these unionists, because they will never, ever help us. But we shouldn't be downhearted here. We should be getting together and uniting the movement, because there's only one change that Scotland needs, and that's independence. And we'll get that once we're united.
Absolutely. And of course, I wrote a blog in 2017, I think it was, when I was saying, no more mitigation. We shouldn't mitigate this. That's what the unions are saying. Oh, well, it's up to you, SNP. You can mitigate this cut, because one of the things they cut, the first thing they cut, Eva, was the winter fuel allowance for the pensioners. I mean, pensioners with the lowest pension in the developed world, the people who are living in poverty, and they hit them as well. This is Labour. I keep repeating that, Labour, the so-called left-wing party. Left-wing, my arse.
There are a number of serious and different strands to this entire argument and process, and it's where the internet comes in particularly handy. This is really the legacy of 2014 and the vow, because you'll remember we were promised then the warm embrace of the shoulders of the British Union, and we were going to be the best little devolved government in the world. The easiest and quickest way to leave the EU was by voting yes, etc., etc. And if you fast forward, you'll remember that weeks and months before the general election, Keir Starmer was explaining that there were going to be no tax increases on the rich, because he wanted to actively promote wealth creation. And what this boils down to is a question of priorities. And when I say that the vow and the performance of Labour in 2014 was important, that was really the first time that we saw in all its glory what better together actually means. And that was when we learned that there is, as we have learned to our great cost ever since, not a pick between the motivation and the performance and the views and the values are the Tories and the Labour Party throughout the United Kingdom. Scotland is an adjunct to them. It's a cash cow. We're here to be bled dry, and we're here to remain under that colonial jackboot for as long as they can maintain us there. What ought to be happening now is that there should be tax increases on the wealthy and priorities should be reordered. The defence budget, for example, should be re-examined very closely. Funds that are sent abroad for defence and other related purposes should be re-examined very closely. And what ought not to be happening is that the swinging cuts, because that's the favourite word that Labour used to use against the Tories, the swinging cuts that there will fall upon the most vulnerable and those who are least able to mitigate these cuts personally or in Scotland's context or Wales nationally by way of devolved powers. But Labour are not a brave party, because what they need to do and they want to do is to pander to that Middle England vote that dictates the way that elections are always won. They need to keep that Middle England vote reasonably happy and reasonably comfortable to maintain themselves in power. The right way to fix these issues just now is to increase the tax take from the wealthy. It is to reorder priorities, and it is to do what a socialist Labour Party would do, and that's to look after the poorest, the most vulnerable, and those who need better public services than are generally available, not necessarily just in Scotland, but throughout the rest of the UK, many of whose figures, especially in England, especially in the NHS and in education, are worse than they are in Scotland. But Labour won't do that, because what they're about, as we've said so many times in the last few weeks, is simply maintaining power. They are not about delivering change, really, at all, because radical change in the United Kingdom would mean increasing the tax take from the wealthy and going back to the days of redistributing wealth. And that seems to be something that Labour have signally forgotten in the course of the last, 4 weeks? So if you think this is bad...
Yep, I've seemed to have lost you there, Eva. Going back to the days of Neil Kinnock, because when they started moving more and more right. So there we have, Phil. We have watch my lips, there'll be no austerity, to swinging cuts. But the good news was, as I say, they gave the king a £45 million a year rise, and $3 billion to Kiev, and God knows how much to Israel. Eva's right, they've got their priorities all wrong, but being fair, they've got such a huge majority, it's going to take the Tories at least a couple of elections to get back. So you would think that they could be a wee bit brave and do something.
No, it's not going to happen, because this is not by accident. This is handing the baton over to the next. It's become the American system, the two cheeks of the same arse. There's virtually no difference between their policies. Certainly, it's the classic watch what they do, not what they say. And people have short memories. We don't pay attention to the politicians, and this is why lies are so pernicious. When we're disenfranchised from the whole electoral system because it doesn't make a difference. And the other thing is, if people hear lies all the time and believe that everything they hear is a lie, they very quickly lose interest, and they're very easy to control. There's some great quotes on that escape me at the moment. But no, winter fuel payment being scrapped when they promised not to. The king gets an extra 45 million. Pay rise. I mean, it's not exactly an anus horribilis for a horrible anus of a man. And speaking of arseholes, that puts me in mind of something you mentioned, or the Anna Sarmar, watch my lips, no austerity under Labour at the beginning. This was, I believe, after Sir Keir Starmer, as Eva was saying, came out with, there will be no return to austerity under my watch. That's what he said. Now, I saw an article on iNews by Andrew Fisher, I thought, very, very good critique. He encapsulates it with the subheading of this article: make no mistake, Labour's manifesto is a return to austerity. It is a political and pernicious choice, a deliberate one. As Alan was talking about, it's the poor that are going to suffer yet again. Grinding us out, grinding us down. Now, you think back to what they say versus what they do. The pluses, look at the Labour manifesto when they weren't going to win in 2017, 2019. Rail was into public ownership, strengthen workers' rights, remove tax exemptions for private schools, all of this. All of this stuff should be universally welcomed. And I agree with Fisher on this, and we all do. However, you contrast that with the Labour manifesto of 2014. This manifesto, as Fisher says, bakes in austerity for public services. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says this 2014 Labour manifesto, sorry, the recent one, means cuts to unprotected departments of 1.9 to 3.9%, when inflation forecast for the next year is around 2.7. So the normal game that political parties play, and they do it particularly with devolved powers, and that people don't, for some reason, don't take the time to get their head around. It's not difficult. We do understand it, especially in business. The normal game is to give services and devolved governments like Scotland an increase that is less than inflation. Then they can legitimately say, you're getting more money than ever, but you're actually still getting a cut. So, but they're not even doing this. They will cut unprotected departments' budgets. So there'll be further severe cuts to already severely depleted services. And only the protected departments will get an increase or stay the same as per funding, while inflation being higher continues to mean that these two are cuts in real terms, but not as bad as the unprotected services. It's a total con, a total game. People, we are being scammed. We really need to wake up to it. And like I say, their words are empty. Watch their actions, not their words.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing he did to come in before they found the 22 billion black hole was increase defence spending by 0.5. Now, people might think 0.5 is not a lot. It's billions, folks, because it's one of our biggest expenditures. Billions for bombs, but nothing for bairns. But the other one is, they don't want to face scrutiny. After Anas Sarwar said, watch my lips, he now doesn't want to face the media. So I just read today, this morning, he's banned the National. Now, I know we all have a view of the National as an independence paper, but the National is not allowed to go to his press conferences in case they ask Anas Sarwar any awkward questions. That's how ridiculous it is that they're scared of the National. They know how much they've been lying. Another thing this week, Alan, that came up, our sacred Bannockburn, the place of our deliverance in the wars of independence. English Labour councillors, well, they call themselves Scottish Labour Party, but they're English Labour councillors, English nationalist folks, are wanting to stick a racetrack at Bannockburn. Sacrilege, disgusting, disgraceful, vile, and they did it with a smile.
Ridiculous. It's just total and utter contempt for Scotland's history, Scotland's culture. And all this is about is politics, because they want to stop the independence movement marching there every single year, raising the issue of independence. That's all they're about. What goes through these people's minds? Not only are they doing this to our sacred ground, they're also increasing the ability to gamble for people in an area with high levels of unemployment and poverty, pushing people further and further into poverty through easy access to gambling. So even if they don't respect our culture, bloody respect the people who cannot afford to gamble that you're just putting right in their face. It's Labour at its best. It's looking for money coming into it, not helping the people who are suffering day to day. This will push many people further into poverty, probably put many people into drugs, and probably increase suicide within that area, because people will be put further and further into a big debt hole.
Yeah, correct. Eva, I know you're in the vicinity. Bannockburn's not far down the road from you. It's been intrinsically linked with yourself your whole life. How did you feel when you heard this news of the English Labour Party councillors doing this?
Not the slightest bit surprised. A little bit disappointed, because we often hear that the saltire belongs to the whole of Scotland, not simply to those who support independence. So that also means, quite correctly, that Scotland's history belongs to everybody in Scotland. So you don't have to be a supporter of independence to want to cherish and protect battlefields that are hugely significant in the context of the development of our country, whether or not you believe that the aims that were being fought for or promoted then were right or wrong. So I'm sad about it. I'm probably quite angry about it, but I'm interested to see what the independence movement and historians who might be neutral on the question of independence want to do about this to preserve and to protect our history. Because you have to know where you've come from to know where you're headed. And it ill behoves others to suggest otherwise. You know, that this isn't about painting our faces blue and dressing up in some old-fashioned Phillimore once or twice a year. This is about the heritage of our nation. And we need to have accurate historical records. We need to have places that are preserved that we can visit, we can learn from, we can understand, we can teach those who come after us. We've been appalled over the years when we've watched various different uprisings and revolutions and really very poor behaviour in other countries of the world when ancient statues and ancient monuments have been destroyed by people that we might describe as Philistines. And yet, in essence, this is what would happen here. It's wrong. It is hugely disrespectful. It is literally dancing on the graves of patriots and heroes who gave their lives for something in which they believed, or on other points might have been press ganged into fighting for. But whatever the truth of the matter is, it's our heritage and we ought to cherish it. We ought not to be ruining and desecrating it.
Oh, absolutely. How did you feel when you heard this news, Phil, that they were trying to do this to Bannockburn?
Yeah, for me, it was just more of the same. It's the depletion of our culture. It's the destruction and the wiping out of our culture. You know, they remember they were trying to build a housing scheme up in Culloden, and then you just look at it, well, why don't you just go straight ahead and ban the kilt again? You know, ban our culture, ban our everything that's precious to our history, to our culture. It's how, and there's some great writers on this, and some great books on this, and there's some very close to the show who've written some very, very good stuff on this. I can't remember the title of the book. Doonhoden, the classic. That's a really good book. But anyway, more on that. What I feel about this is it's another slap in the face, and it's because we're so down. Because we have been divided, we are being ruled. And that's going back to something that Alan said earlier. It's all designed, all of this is designed to divide us. Because united, we are a fearsome force. We are the Scots. We are the people who live and work in Scotland. And our passion for justice, democracy, fairness, egalitarianism, just to be good people, to try to be better, to try to be kind. Yeah, we get it wrong from time to time, but when we're united, we will get what we deserve, which is an independent Scotland that looks after the people who live and work here. And this is just another slap in the face, kicking us when we're down, because the movement is really struggling. It's as if you need me to tell you. Just look around you, all those wonderful, wonderful people who have gone, like Trish now, who will sadly will never see what we were supposed to see, which was independence. Oh, and a thing on the King Charlie gets his 45 million as well, something I forgot to mention. Well, we're getting our services and benefits cuts, and these slaps in the face, like Bannockburn, all cuts. They're getting an additional. It's an additional 45 million. The parasites in Windsor get an additional. Can't remember what it was, but the last time I checked, it was something like 230 million go to the royal family and all the hangers on. So on top of that, another 45. Maybe 300 and something. I didn't want to exaggerate it, because we should stick to we should always try to back stuff up. So apologies for that. I didn't have time to check that one. It just came into my head. But no, another slap in the face. To hell with them.
No, I mean, fair enough, you get 45 million, Charlie, extra, so we're going to paint that thing they're talking about in Edinburgh. We'll give him one of those Pride, right down the mall, Pride, and turn it into a skateboard area for kids, make some money. How would they take that? That's part of your 45 million. They'd be up in arms quick enough about that, wouldn't they? And Eve, if I could come to you this time, go out of rotation a wee bit. St Andrews University, shocking. Stella Maris, who was the elected rector of Stirling, or is the elected rector of Stirling University, made a plea for peace in Palestine and condemned the Israelis for the attacks and the genocidal war that's going on there, which is reasonable, and it's actually truth and it's facts. Some Jewish students apparently got very scared because she said this, and she was removed. It's disgusting. And as the rector herself said, St Andrews University has not only betrayed me, they have betrayed the entire student body. She's absolutely 100% right.
Let's put this in context. Student politics, that's where politicians of the future come from. But it's where you have protests that become, at times, internationally renowned, and at times have a very major impact on political advancement and political development. A particularly good example, Roddy, you'll remember because you'll have lived through it, would be the Parisian riots of the students in 1968, where they almost brought the government down. Yeah. Now, we need student politicians, and we need students led by rectors who represent their views as well as their interests, whether we agree with them or not, because we want to live in a democracy which is a healthy one, where peace-loving views are properly represented. Now, you don't have to agree with this lady in the context of whether or not there is a genocide being committed, but you do agree with her. If you're a decent person, you agree with her that we should be looking at the restoration of peace by democratic diplomatic means. So for her to be removed from her job is anathema to anyone who believes in the rights of students to elect their representatives and in the rights of those representatives to represent the views of the students. So it's an absolute coaching horses through the very founding principles of universities, what we want them to do, what we expect them to do, and what traditionally students have been able to achieve. If you look at the biographies of any of the recent prime ministers or first ministers of anybody within the United Kingdom, go further afield, most of those biographies will tell you what school they went to, what uni they went to, which university political associations they were involved with, where they spoke, where they cut their political teeth, hustings that they attended, the capacity in which they did it. And we've spent an awful long time in the last couple of years here bemoaning the fact that we have professional politicians and spads and youngsters who've never had a job in the real world and have gone into politics. But part of battling in the real world is, if you are a student, to develop your powers and your abilities and your knowledge by speaking at demonstrations and by arguing with your peers and by getting your own point across. And that's what this rector is there to encourage and to make happen. And so to stamp on that is completely and utterly wrong. It's not what we want in a functioning democracy. And it would make people like me question, in fact, just how much of a democratically functioning country Scotland is, and how much of a democratically functioning union the United Kingdom, in fact, now is.
I was getting worried there, Eva, when you started saying you lived through it, Roddy. I thought you were going to go back to Bannockburn. I was going to be a wee bit upset, but you're right. I do remember the Sorbonne riots. We need some more rioting, but for the right things. Alan, sacking the rector, removing the rector from their duties for saying it's true. We want to. I mean, any decent person wants a ceasefire and the end to the killing. And how does that frighten anyone by saying we want peace? Not war, peace.
Over the last 10, maybe 20 years, education in this country has totally changed. We used to teach people how to learn. Now we teach people what they will think. And anyone who goes out with that policy will be removed. And that goes throughout the whole political system, whether it's Tory, Labour, Liberal, SNP, or anyone. The governments do not like critical thinking by anyone.
No.
And they will take that out of our education system any way they can. Now, it is ridiculous anyone who is promoting peace, which every single human being should be promoting. is removed from a position like that. And it just tells what the sad state we are in now. We're a country who prefers to spend money on bombs rather than money on our bairns. That is wrong.
Absolutely. 100%. Phil, quite ridiculous that the rector was removed for saying such a peaceful thing. I mean, I'm a peacenik, and I, as you know, get attacked all the time because I'm shouting for peace in Ukraine since the day of the tanks rolled in February 22. Makes me a pro-Putinist and anti-this and anti-that. People hate people that want to bring peace to the world.
It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre because, and what you're up against here is one of the most powerful lobbies in the world, and these are the lobbies that dictate what the agenda is for humanity on Earth. They're more powerful than countries. And we ought not to forget that. Remember George Soros, who's not your friend, who doesn't give a damn about you. He and the Quantum Fund crashed the pound in, I think it was 92. Him and Jim Rogers, his partner in the Quantum Fund. That's the power that these lobbyists and these people have. It is formidable. So the power of this lobby, the Jewish lobby, is formidable, and it's more Israeli, it's more Zionist, because I've got Jewish friends who are not. I mean, look at the Hasim. A lot of the Hasidic Jews don't actually believe, even in Zionism, and they're the ones with the hats and the curly ringlets, etc., and the black coats that are supporting the people of Palestine and stand against Zionism. So this is a complex issue. But brains brought to mind some of the greatest thinkers. A lot of Jewish people have given us some of the greatest wisdom that we've seen. Theodor Adorno, I think his name was, he came out with a quote, "There's no business like show business." And it's a very emotive subject that you could not, I couldn't come out with a quote like that on my own. I have to defer to Adorno, who actually knows what he's talking about and explains it. And then there's some geniuses and somebody that really should have been listened to a long time ago, Norman G. Finkelstein, right? This guy, he had a book, The Holocaust Industry, on a similar subject, but Norman's been fighting. This guy has been fighting, he's been studying Holocaust studies from Brooklyn, right? He hit a nerve because he stands up for Palestinian rights, and if you just watch him on YouTube and what he writes, he had effectively caused a blackout. He couldn't work anywhere because he stood up for what he believed to be true. How could he, as a survivor of a Holocaust family that were wiped out, how could he stand and watch what was happening in Gaza? A brilliant, courageous and brilliant man. And then you go into things, one of my favourite books ever, the great lesson from this evil, the evil that is the Holocaust that should never be forgotten. The brilliant book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, just search what this is all about. This is about speaking the truth, speaking up, and Viktor Frankl chronicling his experiences as a prisoner in Auschwitz during the Second World War, and he described his psychotherapeutic methods, because when he finished, he went back and started his own school of psychology in Austria again, which involved identifying a purpose to each person's life, man's search for meaning, through one of three ways, to complete tasks, to care for others, or find meaning by facing suffering with dignity. And it comes from Jung, or I can't remember, is it Carl Jung or is it Nietzsche? I can't remember it. It translates from the German, not very well. But this book was so inspirational. On a recent trip last year, I was in Palm Springs, and there was this pop-up like Lucy in Peanuts, the doctor is in psychotherapy for 2 cents, and it was asked the rabbi from the Palm Springs Shabbat a question. I thought, Jesus, this is a great opportunity. So I asked him, responsibility. Why is it that in Frankl's book, I just couldn't get my head around it, that he talks about the Jewish people taking responsibility for the evil done to them through history, and in this case by the Nazis. Somehow Viktor Frankl's explaining, we take responsibility for this done by them. And it's a wonderful understand, because this man, it makes you understand as a pacifist, and there's no evil should not be done. If it's done to you, you should not do it to others. And this is why there's some great thinkers out there, some great lessons, some great direction, intellectual direction, that can show you how to behave when you're a victim. And it's not be the victim, it's taking responsibility for your situation and moving on. That is magnificent, and that is one thing that this plays right into. These kids, this children's politics is so far removed from the deep, clear thinking that comes from pain and suffering and the evil that men do to others. And that is why, for me, it's so poignant and hard-hitting that we should be so blasé about this woman being removed for speaking the truth. The truth. That is the whole point of Finkelstein. It's the whole point of Adorno. It's the whole point of Viktor Frankl. It's the whole point of the lessons from this evil. We must not forget it, because we must not allow it to be repeated. And here we are seeing the same thing in Gaza. That, dear friends, is the tragedy.
It sure is. And we should make a case that, there's a difference, ladies and gentlemen, between Judaism and Zionism. And Zionism is the problem, not the Jewish religion. That's not the problem. The problem is Zionism. And if you're watching this show, you don't know what that is, you really should look it up, because the majority of our viewers I know do. But slightly, it brings me on to, because of what you've been saying there, Phil, Eva, there's riots going on just now down in England. And again, they were kicked off with the false assumption that a Muslim had stabbed children down in outside a mosque, which wasn't true. It turns out it was a non-Muslim guy who did it, but that wasn't the point. The riots have gone on. And now the British media are immediately blaming Farage and Banks and a few others and, right-wing thugs. But here's my contention, even. You're a legal person. If the government are going to break international law and ignore international law, and the public watch it and see it, and they're arming people who have been accused of war crimes and genocide against the law, why should they have any respect for law? How can we look down on these thugs? Because as I said in a recent tweet, the thugs are wearing Savile Row suits. They're the liars, and they're the ones that are killing lots of people. So how can you expect the people you rule over to respect the law if they don't respect the law?
Well, call me cynical, Roddy, but this has a very orchestrated look about it from where I'm sitting. I can't help but have echoing inside my head. Let's get tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. These riots seem to me to have a level of management and organisation and engineering around them. And I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised if we have more announcements next week of punitive action to be taken by the powers that throughout the UK. Now, one of the announcements made over the weekend was that in England, and I think possibly also in Wales, there will be some sort of powers deployed whereby courts will sit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to clear the backlog of people that are likely to be arrested during these riots. Since when did courts require to sit for 24/7? And who's been consulted about this? And if that's able to happen in England and Wales at the drop of a hat, why hasn't it happened before now, when the numbers in prisons and the numbers on remand are at breaking point, at record point, and a similar position applies in Scotland, because we know that both north and south of the border, there's had to be special measures implemented to start to let people out of the jail. How can you be letting folk out of the jail early on the one hand, and on the other, you're talking about courts sitting 24/7 to fill the jails back up again? I mean, how absolutely through the looking glass has the United Kingdom gone? So this is about far more than people not obeying the law. This is about whether people have respect for the law. And if you don't have respect for the law, why is it? And it is, to a large extent, how we have watched successive governments erode respect for the law and for the judiciary. Remember these front page headlines about how judges were the enemies of the people? Remember how we had Boris Johnson and so many around him breaching the COVID rules regularly, when the rest of us were locked up at home, allowed out for an hour a day for a walk on our own, and they were having parties? How quickly we've forgotten all of that. when they say that there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, yeah, the rot starts at the top and it goes right down to the very bottom of society. So I'm condoning by no stretch of the imagination, I'm condoning violence.
No.
I'm certainly not at all impressed with what we've seen in terms of buildings being set on fire. There was a library set on fire yesterday somewhere in the north of England. Who in their right mind sets fire to a public library, for God's sake? You know, these people are either demented or put up to it for nefarious reasons, or somebody in a position of authority knows perfectly well what they're doing, and there's a puppet master pulling strings, getting the result that they want, so that they can then hammer the crime agenda in a manner that only the Tories used to do.
But I go back to my point, Alan. I mean, I remember sitting with my mum and dad, who were smoking at the time, telling me not to smoke. So what? You know, kind of ridiculous. But this is, if they're going to break the law at the top of the tree, you know, they're going to break at the bottom. But just before that, you're going to stick up that one of Keir Starmer again. I want to ask you this, Alan. Riots throughout, fire riots across the United Kingdom now. If I'm not mistaken, the United Kingdom, that country, it's not a country, that state has got Scotland, England, 6 occupied counties of Northern Ireland and Wales. As far as I'm led to believe, the riots are only going on in England. Last month, they were all happy to take the English badge with them in the final of the Euros. But now when the shits hit the fan, it's suddenly all across the UK. They do this all the time. And even today, the Sun was trying to suggest that an unfortunate stabbing last night in Stirling, it was as if, you see, we're as bad, we're in part of this. It's blatant propaganda.
That is, I mean, used to be a time where people respected the law. But you're right. If our governments do not respect the law, why should we? Why should we? And then the other aspect of this is when you bring in bad laws. Why should we then respect bad laws that are removing our rights? But then you have the other side of it as well, where you have the lies coming in that's generating hatred. The people like Tommy Robinson's that are just whipping up as much hate as he can, and then buggers off to a foreign country so he can't face trial here. Some man, eh? People should actually look at that man closely and see what he's all about, because he's not the nice person looking after your interests. He is just a racist person that should just be got rid of. He's very, very dangerous, and people should start waking up to people like that. Yep. But I mean, when you come onto the laws, we should all look after our own communities. We should. It doesn't matter what culture you come from, what colour of skin you've got. We should all be looking after one another, like what we used to do in the olden days. People seem to forget. They keep going on about this race and that race. There's only one race, and that's the human race. Everything else is just man-made. We're all humans, and it's time that we actually start giving respect to one another. And when we've got respect for one another, the law will then have respect for us, and we will have respect for the law.
These riots, Phil, going across, you and I mean, I'm sure everyone watching this show saw the same one we watched, what you and I howled at. The gammon who was dancing in front of the police and get a brick in the chest, a brick in the head, and then one in the family jewels. I'm just thinking about it, I'm still howling. But these riots are no joke, they're no laughing matter, although that was an extremely funny one. But is this the start of the revolution? Is this the start, or is it all, as Eva suspects, orchestrated to take an eye off of something else?
Much public protest is orchestrated. It's certainly, if it's not, it's controlled. If it's not one of their own, I mean, look at an assassination attempt on Trump. Okay, a kid climbs on a nearby roof, not close enough that the prime directive of the security services in America is to ensure something like that doesn't happen. It's a catastrophic failure of their protocols, procedures and processes, that you will get fired from that service if you make a tiny mistake that doesn't result in anything like that attempt on Trump's life. That was clearly orchestrated, and I would go to Scott Ritter, I would go to some of the commenters in the Grey Zone and some of the other objective commentators who challenge the authority story. This is more of the same. Of course, if this is something that works into the narrative that the establishment want to be seen, then they will permit it. They will not prosecute. Look at Craig Murray going to jail for jigsaw identification when we had others more blatantly in breach of that somewhat legislation. And we've forgotten about the horrible little woman that prosecuted the judge in the case. We shouldn't forget her. She should be held responsible for her actions. You're not above the law. No one should be above the law, and that's the problem. When you have corrupted the institutions the way that the institutions have been in the West, like the UN, that's supposed to stand up for peace. You know, the European Union's supposed to be collaborative, working together for the people of the United Nations. It no longer does that. Van der Leyen and all these other shysters are now in the hands of the lobbyists, the ones that are causing all the problems. They're the people, they're the small organisations that buy people out and take people out that get in the way are the problem in this society. And people, courageous people like Norman Finkelstein, people that stand up for those that went before us, those upon whose shoulders we stand, no matter how much you contribute, to stand up against the man and take on the machine is a very courageous thing to do, and it is and it can cost you. By God, it can cost you. But do you know what? They fear us. They fear the unification. It goes back to the same thing that Alan mentioned earlier, and we've been talking about it for a very, very long time. Unification of the people. It has been throughout history the only method by which you can oust corruption, the corruption of the institutions, the corruption of our supposed leaders, elected or otherwise. So no, do I believe, and I'm, the truth is out there, but you can't look at mainstream media, folks. You need to look at alternative sources of media. And we should actually more regularly run lists of where we get our information. We've done it in the past, you know. I think we should do more of that to give people the option. If you can be arsed, and you should be, given we're on the edge of melting the planet and destroying the human race through this. I mean, remember that meme? People are sitting on a train with social media laughing at it while the world burns around them because they get more hits on some kitten meme they put up. You know, it's like, pay attention, folks. We're being distracted, and that's what this type of thing is. You're distracted by some of these gamins jumping out, blaming the poor, blaming some sex, divide and conquer. That's what it is. Divide and rule. You set one set against the other. We're too busy fighting each other to understand what's actually going on. No, we need to forgive, be human, and stand up for what is right.
Absolutely. Phil's absolutely right about divide and rule and unity. And that goes, I'm talking now to everyone who supports Scottish independence. We need unity, and we need to stop being divided and ruled by people who are in it for themselves, the gravy slurpers, etc. We've got to take control of that. But that's another issue for another day. What a topic we've discussed on here so many times, Eva, is the rights of women and all the gender nonsense that's going on now. It's really hit a peak this week in the Olympics in Paris, which I still haven't watched a second of or a minute of. I'm only picking up stuff on social media, and I will not watch any of it, where a man, in fact, two men, one from Taiwan and one from Algeria, I think, beating shit out of women in boxing rings. And they're saying, well, we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to stop it. I mean, looking at the one on the left, you wouldn't realise it was a man, which it's just ridiculous. This is the stage it's got to now. This is going back to the point I made last time. They're lying to us about, genocide. It's not happening. Men can be women. But it's all right. I mean, they're boxing. It's fair. It is a woman. It's all this dishonesty and lie and distorting the truth. It just, where does it stop, Eva? Have we got to get a woman killed in the ring before someone goes, well, you know what? Maybe it's not right.
It's the dishonesty, the lack of integrity, the lies, the obfuscation and manipulation and the bullying of people who speak out against this that's so very disgusting, dispiriting and disheartening. I've actually got a pair of boxing gloves here because my son is a boxer, and I can promise you that as a female, I would not want to feel the full force of that slamming into my nose and my face, my cheek and my forehead, like these two young women did over the weekend, being assaulted by people who are men. What we've done is we've made the battering, the assaulting, the degradation of women into an Olympic sport. That's what has happened in the last few days. And those who fail to understand what's going on need to re-educate themselves, because the Algerian boxer and the Chinese boxer, I think, who was from one of the Chinese provinces, perhaps Taiwan, I'm not sure, had both been disallowed or disqualified last year because they failed what in effect was a sex test. I think some are calling it a gender test. It wasn't, it was a sex test, because they both had the Y chromosome in essence. So if you've got a Y chromosome, it's because you're male. And if you've got a Y chromosome, it means that you're not female and you're not ever going to be female. And the issue for at least these two men, but I think there are others that are now being called into question, is that they may have been born with some sort of disorder of development of their sexual organs, so that at birth they were identified as female because there was some degree of dubiety, and they may well have spent the first few years of their lives, perhaps into early teenage years, as girls. But it became obvious at puberty that they were male because of the manner in which their bodies began to develop and because of the explosion of testosterone within their bodies. So there is no doubt that the Algerian fellow and the Chinese one, and I think another one from Thailand, are male. The fact that they self-identify as female is completely irrelevant. They are actually male. They're not trans. They're not claiming to be trans. They're claiming to be female. And there's a very easy way for the International Olympic Committee to resolve this difficulty, and it is by doing a cheek swab, because that will define completely, without any doubt at all, whether they're XX or XY. And I don't really care about levels of privacy or otherwise for the individuals concerned, because I think there was nothing more humiliating than expecting females who have fought hard and trained hard over a long period of time to get to the Olympics, being confronted with the choice of being in a ring with somebody who was going to flatten them and potentially cause them serious long-term damage, or walk away from something to which they dedicated a huge time of their life. And to watch one young woman being pummeled for less than a minute, and to read comments online about how she shouldn't be there, you know, if it was too hot in the kitchen, she ought to have got out. If she couldn't take a bit of pain, she was in the wrong sport, which was legitimising a man battering hell out of a woman in the name of sport in 2024. I mean, you know, you may shake your head or hide your eyes, but this is reality. And the guy from the International Olympic Committee who was justifying this, I understand, may have been one of Keir Starmer's best men at his wedding.
Indeed.
You know, this needs very, very close scrutiny and examination. These people who claim to be female, but the rest of us consider are male, just have to put themselves up to scrutiny properly, scientifically. Less of the messing about. The two who were disqualified and are currently now going to be in the finals and guaranteed a medal did not proceed with appeals against their disqualification. That speaks volumes. They could appeal now, they could produce scientific evidence now if they are actually female and prove it to the world. The fact that they're refusing so to do says it all. But if you would like a little Isla Bryson moment, as memorable as that was, remember Isla Bryson in his leggings? Well, there's similar footage of Imani Khalif in his shorts, and it's abundantly clear that what he's hiding in his shorts isn't a budgie.
Indeed, it's quite despicable. I remember a while back they used to do that in the Olympics because there was a South African girl athlete who failed a sex test. So they've done it before, they should be doing it again. And as I said last week, I think in the show, if they're allowing men and trans women to fight in take part and just allow everyone to take any drugs they want. Well, why not? Let's all cheat. But it goes back to what I'm saying, Alan, about everything. If the establishment and a ruling elite are going to lie and break the law and bend the rules to suit what they want, their narrative, why should the public be any different? We should be allowed to break any law we want if that's the way they want to operate.
Yeah, I mean, things have just went downhill very quickly. And to come for a defence that this individual has a medical condition that we cannot see evidence of under privacy laws is just ridiculous. But let's look at the condition. Now, I think it's called, I may pronounce this wrong, Cymer syndrome. Now, this gets picked up usually about puberty. And the reason it gets picked up at that stage is because they cannot go through proper puberty, which means that their muscle mass will be low. Their bone density will be low unless they get HRT. And when they get HRT, testosterone levels will be low. So why has he got high testosterone levels? And I'm sorry, but if you walk like a man, talk like a man, and check your junk before you start a fight like a man, then you're a man.
Here, absolutely. The clock's starting to beat us, Phil. I'd like to move on because there's some really heavy-duty topics that we really must cover. Because as I said at the start of the show, I mean, for all I know, during this recording just now, it might all have kicked off again in the Middle East. It's really quite scary. We're so close to World War III. And I mean, we were out for dinner last night and everyone's laughing and joking and smiling as if everything. We're so close. It's really very scary what's happened.
Yeah, this is horrific, and people don't want to know about it. And we talked about the meme earlier but the meme that we talked about. People are focused on social media and other issues, and it's the distraction, diversion, focus your attention on stuff that doesn't really matter. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to folk, because politics has always been an issue. You know, you've got your family should come number one, your job to provide for your family. God forbid you get a wee bit of social time and you go out and you get a game of golf or whatever you want to do, and that takes up your time. Who's got the time to actually look into the economics of a country, to understand the 35 or so fiscal and monetary levers to run an economy? Who's got that time to check the accounts, the balance sheet of a government, to understand the game that has been played by the implementation of the GERS underlaying, which is a total con, and a cooking of the books? Every business person understands how books get cooked. Everyone who understands accountancy and balance sheets knows how books get cooked, and how you play the rules. You play the rules of the game. And that includes the Mayfair tax loophole. That includes all sorts of little tricks and little methodologies. I mean, the tax book that Gordon Brown, when he finished with, it was double the thickness. The amount of loopholes in it's the same QCs that are designing the loopholes, that design the book, that work for the institutions to circumvent this information, that work for the government to write the legislation, and they just keep changing, they keep it up to date. You cannot stay ahead of it. This is more of the same. We're now in a situation where the misinformation, and this, I hate to admit it, but it's true, Trump's got a point, fake news, it's everywhere, and it's been forced down our throats, and those of us who depend exclusively on mainstream media will always fall foul of this, because you're not being presented with the facts. The truth is out there, as it famously said in that TV series, but digging through it on the internet with all the kittens and crap on it, and lies and misinformation, is difficult, but at least you can find it there. One thing's for sure: if you're relying on the mainstream media, you will not find the truth, unless it's an insipid little piece of information to keep you thinking you're on track here. So no, it's pernicious, it's extremely dangerous, and we are now, I mean, what can you do about it? Well, you can stand up and get rid of everybody in Scotland, for starters. Here, you've got nuclear weapons, Britain's nuclear deterrent, which is not independent. It's American. It's Lockheed Martin warheads. It's etc. Right? It's like, I think, is it 35 miles or 45 miles within Glasgow Faslane and Coulport. I can't remember the exact distance, but put it this way: the method for taking out an area like that in a nuclear war is to send at least 2 nuclear devices to detonate. One of them will wipe out the central belt. One of them hits what the central belt is wiped out, and there's other methods. With what was talked about was Britain could be completely taken out by detonating in the Irish Sea and in the sea just off the coast, and will be flooded, absolutely flooded and wiped out. So either way, we go. Even when we're on the edge of Europe, that's why France doesn't keep their nuclear warheads in France. You know, we're in serious trouble here. We're allowing the people who run America, run Britain, and not the good American people, not the good British people, not the good French people, not the good people of the European Union, but the leaders who have been corrupted, who are now doing everything they can to maximise profit. Now, I don't think they believe we're going to go to nuclear war. There are individuals we should fear who believe in the rapture and who believe in that we should all we die and be judged in front of God. No, you can go to hell. I hope you do, because you probably deserve it. If that's what you want for humanity and humankind, you're not the caring human beings that I want in my society. I mean, I want to know who you are and where you are. But no, this is very, very serious, and we just don't give it enough attention. There's so much to be understood here. It's such a complex issue, but the bottom line is we're being lied to, and we're now in a position where we could be wiped out as a race and as humanity and destroy the planet. Is appalling, absolutely appalling. Just a last wee point, just on the last one. I've got some more stuff to do here, but I don't think this woman's a trans woman, because trans is illegal in Algeria, where she comes from. I've got some more checking to do in that, but I totally agree. I continue to be passionate in support of protection of safe spaces for women and girls. Don't support males in women's sports. So trans women have went through puberty, should not be allowed to compete in women's sports. However, I think there's been a bit of an injustice done to this person who I believe is a woman. I don't think she's got male genitalia. I think she was born with a vagina. But anyway, there's more research to be done on that. But no, we're in danger, folks, of losing everything. We should be paying attention.
Yeah, because it's the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, Eva, was an illegal act against international law. Iran has gone to the UN and said, this is an act of war against us. We claim the right, Article 57, to defend ourselves. International law. The UN has agreed that is the law, international law. Yet we have the United States of America, the United Kingdom, the EU all saying they're Jordan and Egypt, all rushing to defend. They're going to defend Israel and break international law. It goes back to my theme for this whole show. If they won't respect the law, why should I?
Dangerous road to go down, though, Roddy, isn't it? And the difficulty with all of this is we see again, it's not about the rights and the wrongs or morality or legality. It's about vested interests and agendas and what might be hidden in the context of what resources might we be able to plunder if certain developments pan out in a certain fashion. Because if it's not oil, it's gas. If it's not gas, it's something else. And bottom line is, are there any politicians anywhere in the world to be trusted? Do any of them actually follow international law? Do they follow domestic law? Who has principle these days? We doubt the motivation of many at the top of the European organisations. We're beginning to doubt the abilities, the power, the influence of the international organisations. And it's at times like this that the world really needs people of principle to step up to the plate and to have an impact. What we don't need is the spectacle that we're watching unfold on the international stage in the context of wars all over the place, especially in the Middle East, but also the concerns that there are developing within the United States in the context of what the outcome of their election is likely to be, because that will have such a horrendous impact on the future of the world because of the impact that it has on the Middle East particularly. Very, very sad and difficult times.
Now, I'm beginning to think, Alan, there's not a Western government that's not in the back pocket of Tel Aviv. It seems that they're all falling into line with what's happening. And if Israel are allowed to break international law at will, which they seem to be, 64 UN resolutions that smashed. Iraq broke 2 and got bombed back to the Middle Ages. If they do that and then tell us that there's not a genocide happening and no, you can't defend yourself, only Israel's allowed to defend itself and Israel can't be attacked, I go back to my point. Why should any of us live within the laws of the world?
No, I mean, they're just learning from the US and United Kingdom for illegal wars, aren't they? And we're just continuing by supporting Israel's illegal war and genocide. But how could a nation that went through what they did during the Second World War justify the murder and genocide that they're pushing forward now? It is no wonder their own people are opposing what they're doing. Right throughout the world, Jews throughout the world are supporting the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, against who they think was supposed to be their government in Israel. It is ridiculous that this country, that the leaders of this country are committing murder in front of the world and nothing is getting done to them.
Shocking. It is shocking, but again, I stress, folks, there is a difference between Zionism and Judaism, completely different. And this is the Zionists. And you can be a Zionist without being Jewish. And we have a lot of white Zionists, like every candidate for the US presidential election, which is quite scary. Anyway, folks, we'll come to the end. The clock's beating us, as always, and we have to leave you. But I just want to leave, just before we go, ladies and gentlemen, I want to go back to our first item, where a really good friend of the show and a friend of our personal friends of some of us here, Trish, has passed away. So a little nod to Trish.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.